Hello everybody. Today I want to talk to you about my general thoughts on living in South America. I came to South America first in 2021, right in the middle of the pandemic. First I lived in Spain. I was not able to get my papers there, my residential papers. That is not easy to do in Spain. The bureaucracy is quite stiff. There are too many foreigners, and the Spanish are protesting against foreigners, against tourists. They have their issues with the United Kingdom. How many wars have they had with the UK over the last few centuries? Plenty. Ethnic tensions are running high, especially after Brexit, as Brexit has exacerbated that. So I came to Brazil in 2021, and the reason that I came to Brazil is that it was one of the two countries on the continent, from what I recall, that had fairly relaxed COVID policies. I still had only one vaccine at the time. I only got one from Spain. The second one was hard to get, so I had to go get it in the United States, and Brazil let me in with little trouble. President Bolsonaro had a very pro-American policy, and it was just a good time for Americans to be in Brazil in 2021. The dollar was high, inflation wasn't bad. Now inflation is a pretty big deal in Brazil. The only other option was Colombia, and I did not want to go to Colombia. There's too many issues, too many Americans turning up dead after they went on a date. In fact, the chief of police in Colombia went so far as to say that Americans should not be using applications like Tinder or Bumble, for example, because there is too many criminals taking advantage of them. There were countless cases where Americans wound up drugged and robbed, and this happened to many of my friends, many expats whom I know. In Brazil, that really was not such a big issue. I lived in Rio for 6 months in 2021. I did not like it much at all, so I went back to Europe, and the war had started. The war started in in Ukraine, and I lived in Serbia. I was protesting in front of the Russian embassy with a massive flag of Ukraine, alongside people like Pyotr Nikitin, who is a well-known dissident in Serbia. He had some major legal problems because of his strong pro-Ukrainian stance, and he even founded the Russian Democratic Society in the UK and another one in Serbia. And then, having spent time with him, I understood that there were irreconcilable differences between myself and many Russian-speaking expats in Serbia. For example, Nikitin himself firmly believed in the possibility of changing the mentality of Serbians, making them less pro-Russian. Serbia has a long-standing history with Russia. They're both Orthodox country, and Russia stood by them, but a lot of Russian expats who live in Serbia are against Putin for obvious reasons, though Serbian people themselves are very much pro-Putin. All of that brought me to the point where I decided to just leave Serbia. The climate was too pro-Putin, and I did not have much common ground with the Russian expat population who settled there. I just did not believe that it was possible for us to change their minds, to make them less pro-Putin. I went to Montenegro for 3 months, and I did not like it there much better. So there are a lot of the people I met there seemed like they were part of the corruption in Russia, oligarchs, dirty business people who were laundering their money. Of course, not all, just some of them were like it, but I have met quite a few who were that way. And then I decided to just turn my back in Europe altogether and go to South America. It's easier to get your illegal residency papers in South America. It's cheaper. Yes, there is inflation in South America too, but inflation is just so much worse in Europe because of the war in Ukraine, supply chain disruptions, the lingering consequences of COVID-19. There is a refugee crisis, not only from Africa, but also Eastern Europe. It's tough. Now there are more and more people competing for limited housing, limited resources. This is a tough time to live in Europe, and I now live in South America. In South America, well, Brazil used to be a nice place to be, yet, however, and now inflation is a major issue. The dollar is soaring in Brazil. The dollar is worth 6.3 reals. I feel like my purchasing power is much less than what it was before when the dollar was 5 reals. Honestly, when I left Brazil in 2021, the dollar was kind of weak at 4.7 reals. And then I came back, it was much higher, and I was thinking, great, I'm gonna be richer in Brazil. No, not so. What actually happened is that there was so much inflation, and so on the report, that my purchasing power dwindled substantially. when I came back to Brazil in early 2022. And now the dollar is even higher, and I just would not have the same luxurious standard of living that I had in early 2022. It was the right time to jump ship. I went to Paraguay. Here the currency is stable, and I'm really thankful for that. I appreciate it that here it's much cheaper. Here everything is substantially cheaper than what it was in Spain during the pandemic, and that was the cheapest time to live in Spain. Now Spain is much more expensive because of Pedro Sanchez's environmentally friendly policies. Yes, global warming is a real issue. Yes, that's something to look out for. However, it's important to understand that everything comes with a price, that if you want to be environmentally responsible, you have to pay the bill for that. And in Spain, it's not Pedro Sanchez and the politically and the financially elite who pay the bill for their Green New Deal, as they call it. It's the ordinary people. And the same goes for Emmanuel Macron in France. So he says, let's make our planet great again, mocking you know who. And wonderful, if he wants to make our planet great again, the French people are gonna have to pay for it. You're gonna have to pay more for gas, you're gonna have to pay more for food, you're gonna have to pay more for basic services, and who suffers the most? The lower middle and the middle class. This erodes the middle class, this heightens class tensions, this also heightens racial tensions, as in France they're quite intimately intertwined with the question of class, race and class go hand in hand. And what now? So both France and Spain have been destabilized significantly. And what for? Now there is a massive flood in Spain that was unthinkable, unheard of 5 to 10 years ago. And despite all, the Spanish are paying much higher prices to be environmentally friendly. What exactly have they changed? They've changed absolutely nothing. The climate situation is a disaster. Now the socioeconomic position is horrible. France is having the same issue as I said, and all of Europe is going down the same rabbit hole. There is more instability, more chaos, higher cost of living, more racial tensions, more segregation. Absolute nightmare. So glad I'm not in Europe anymore. Now, in Latin America, it's not that bad. In Latin America, there is not quite that much hostility toward foreigners. Just don't go to Mexico. You know, they have a saying that we're so far from God, but so close to the United States. Colombia has a long-standing history with America, with American presidents, and the Panama Canal disaster. They're envious of how Panama got more American support than Colombia. No, there's a handful of countries where they're tired of Americans, say Colombia, Mexico, maybe Costa Rica to a lesser extent. But if you go to Brazil, there is not much anti-American sentiment. In Rio de Janeiro, there's plenty of Americans. In Salvador de Bahia, there's plenty of Americans. Now, I would not recommend these cities necessarily because they're dangerous, but that is to say the Brazilians are generally pretty hospitable, they're pretty welcoming, they do like Americans. And in Paraguay, yeah, this is a very much an open and a receptive environment. I enjoy it very much. They have no issues with Americans, although they may have some issues with Brazilians and Argentinians. They lost a lot of territory. But if you come here as an American, North American or European, you're going to do just fine. You're going to find a warm and a welcoming environment with no issues whatsoever. Now, if you go to Argentina, that's a little tricky. Depends on whom you ask. President Javier Milei is very pro-American. You know, he won the election by a landslide, 55% of the vote. That's the biggest blowout since the country's return to democracy in 40 years. Nobody performed better in an election than Javier Milei. So there are a lot of people who support him in Argentina. Argentina is also a country of immigrants like the United States. I would not say they're an anti-American country altogether now, but there are definitely segments of the population on the very far left who are quite anti-American. So that's something to watch out for. It depends on who you're running into. Uruguay is probably the nicest, the most civilized, the most sophisticated country. South America, there you're not going to find that same sentiment. Uruguay is like Argentina without Peronism, without people like Cristina Kirchner, Alberto Fernandez, without the legacy of Juan Domingo Perón. They're the anti-American leftists with some extreme nationalist tendencies to ram the economy in Argentina into the ground. There is no such garbage in Uruguay. It's almost like a dream come true. The better, the more organized, the less corrupt version of Argentina, and it is true. Uruguay is doing very well on the corruption perception index. It's at least it's even cleaner than the United States. If it were a European country, it would probably pass all the requirements to be in the European Union. Now, the last thing to talk about is Chile. Chile is the most pro-American country now. Yes, there are some elements of anti-American leftism with the current president, Gabriel Boric, but his left-leaning constitutional proposal did not pass. It was shut down by two-thirds of the vote. Chile rejected it, and I've met a lot of people from Chile. They're all in agreement that their country is definitely much more Americanized. There is private healthcare. The free markets are thriving. Businesses are much more efficient than they are in most of Latin America. And out there, you're not going to catch any flack for being American or European or Canadian. The one thing to look out for in Chile is that it's expensive. I mean, Chile is almost as expensive as Uruguay. If you're a European country, I definitely say that it's almost as expensive as Hungary. You know, not the most expensive country, but it'd be cheaper than Slovakia, cheaper than Hungary, definitely more expensive than Romania. You know, probably more expensive than Serbia, probably a little under Croatia. So imagine what it costs to live in the Balkans or Eastern Europe. Romania, Slovakia, Romania, Serbia, that part of the world. If Chile were a European country, it'd probably meet the requirements for joining the EU, and it is as sophisticated as most of the lower tier European countries. It's a great place to be, and then if I had to choose, I'd rather live in Chile. I'd rather go to La Serena, up north in Chile, 8 hours by bus from Santiago, nice little touristy town. 300 sunny days a year. That's right. The weather is Mediterranean. There is a Mediterranean climate there. There is barely any rain. Dry, humid climate. No issues. No political instability. Yes, there was a minor refugee crisis from Venezuela. There are a lot of newcomers from Venezuela, while most are civilized people who are not creating problems. There is a small minority of Venezuelan refugees who wreak havoc. But all in all, the geopolitical situation is not as extreme as it is in Eastern Europe. First of all, there is the possibility of a war. Secondly, there are millions of people from Ukraine who desperately need help, and they keep in common. The refugee crisis from the Middle East and Africa is an ongoing issue. And the cost of living are shooting up. Say Hungary has a serious inflation problem. Slovakia used to be cheap. Romania used to be cheap before the pandemic, not anymore. So if I had to really choose one or the other, I'd rather live in Chile than in the Balkans. All right, guys, thanks so much for listening, and contact me for a free consultation. If you want to move to any other country, book a meeting with me. I'll teach you everything I know, and we'll have a wonderful discussion. Thanks so much.